I'm now joined by Elliot from the Highways England, who's been talking today about the strategic road network and what Highways England is doing to improve it, because obviously it's the lifeblood, literally the veins through which the traffic flows. Elliot, just tell me quickly what you've been talking about today. What are the key themes that you've been trying to get across to the audience today?
Yeah, so we've been talking a bit about what we're trying to do to improve the road network, but now, and then actually how we're looking forward and planning for the future as well. Both the sort of short-term future, we're in the planning cycle of thinking about the next 5-year road investment period over 2020 to 2025, but also the longer term and how new technology in particular can impact how we're going to use and operate our roads.
Yes, okay. Do you feel in your role at Highways England that you have enough money, that the DFT prioritises road enough over other major infrastructure projects? I think sometimes we feel in the industry that roads are taken for granted a little bit.
Yep.
It falls apart, but the trucks still run, and rail and cross rail and high speed too and all that seem to get much more attention.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the orphan of in the DFT when you go and see the minister?
No. So I think it is really important that we both, I think, as an industry and as government and as a nation, really understand the importance of our roads. So I think it's between 8 and 9 out of 10 journeys are made by road.
Yes.
So over sort of 2/3 of all freight actually travels on the SRN, so the strategic road network alone. So I think it genuinely is the lifeblood of the country.
Yes.
We've been pleased since we became Highways England in 2015. We also set up the road investment strategy, and that included a significant uptick in funding. So we had about £15 billion of investment over the past 5 years, from 2015 through to 2020. I think that's much needed investment.
Yes.
We're starting to see the benefits of that, and it's important that investment will continue. So at the last budget, the government committed to spend £25.3 billion over the second road period, so 2020 to 2025. And I think that continued level of investment is critical, because we do want to provide a network that meets the needs of your users, really, and our customers.
Yes. How much of that money will go into increasing capacity, and how much is just maintaining what we already have?
Yeah. It's a mix, to be honest, and that will sort of vary over the period. That maintaining what we already have is really critical.
Yes.
So actually, in our SRN initial report, which was we published about a year ago, and was really set out our priority for the second road period. We said our first priority is operating, maintaining, and renewing our network, because actually kind of keeping the network, in good shape. And it is an aging network, so it does need more investment to keep it in good shape, but then also operating it, so making sure that our traffic officers, etc., can clear incidents. Keeping that network flowing is probably the first priority of our customers. And then once we get beyond that, we do need to invest in enhancements as well, but it's really important we get that focus on that first bit first.
Obviously, smart motorways is a bit of a controversial topic. We see a lot of roadworks everywhere now where it's been installed. Any safety concerns from your point of view about the lack of a hard shoulder?
Yeah, so the evidence that we have so far is showing that smart motorways are at least as safe, if not safer, than conventional motorways. And they're actually starting to deliver real benefits. So we're really aware that when you invest on the network, the challenge is obviously it does mean roadworks, and we need to do those in a way that minimises the impact on customers. But actually what we're starting to see now is the real impact and the benefit of those smart motorways paying off. So I was up in Manchester the other week at it was the Mayor's Transport Board talking about congestion on the strategic road network around Manchester, which has had a lot of smart motorway works. And actually the congestion figures were the best they've been for 3 years. And some of the benefits really, the reasons for that is, those smart motorway schemes are opening and providing more capacity, enabling us to manage traffic flows, and those benefits are being shown.
Yes. You mentioned congestion. Obviously, it's a big issue at certain times, and other times you drive around the motorway network and there's nothing on. Is there any way that you can foresee the foreseeable future of some sort of road charging system to try and spread the peaks out, or is that not really an issue that you look at?
To be honest, road charging is a question for government. I think what the big shift in sort of funding, I would say, that we're going to see over this second road period is we've got the hypothecation of vehicle excise duty. So from 2020 onwards, vehicle excise duty is going to a national roads fund the vast majority of which is going to fund Highways England.
Yes.
We think that's really important and actually a positive thing, because actually we want to have our funding directly linked to actually some of the money our customers pay. Actually, we think that is really helpful in that it actually drives that kind of closer customer focus and customer experience. Really.
Again, I don't know if you have a view on this, and my own personal view is I think the vehicle excise duty is a really outdated way of funding the road network, because if I have a car and I do 3,000 miles in it, I pay the same road fund licence as somebody who does 30,000 miles, and they're using the roads a lot more. I don't know if there is, whether you could put more duty on the fuel or have road charging. As I said, I don't know if that's a view of funding the network which you can comment on, really.
I mean, that really is it's more of a question for Treasury, I think. I mean, there is my reflection would be that, in VED you have a tax on the type of vehicle, and then in fuel duty you have a tax per mile. So, there is a blend. Any changes to that would be the remit of Treasury.
Yes. Obviously, you look after what they call strategic road network. That's major trunk routes. How does that fit in with the councils, local authorities and county councils? How do you integrate to make sure that you're not duplicating effort and make sure that the investment is going in the right place? How does that work?
So we do. I mean, one of the things I mentioned on stage is we're very conscious that actually those connections between the strategic road network and the local network or other transport modes are really critical. Very few people start and end their journey on the strategic road network, so getting those connections right is important. And I think we try and work together really at all ends of the cycle. So from a sort of strategic and sort of planning perspective, we do work with local authorities. Actually, one of the big shifts over recent years has been the subnational transport bodies that have been set up. So people like Transport for the North, who I think have played a really useful role in terms of bringing together a lot of those sort of, the local authorities and actually providing a fairly kind of consistent view of, a region's priorities and sort of thinking multimodally. In operations, actually, we do try and link up and work together closely with local operators. So we have ways that our kind of regional control centres actually sort of interact. In some areas, I think like the West Midlands, we actually have a joint control centre with the local authority as well. And some of the, I think, really exciting things about new technology is really about how can we use new data to get those kind of networks working better together. So one of the things we've done in Manchester, we've launched a pilot that is effectively we are taking floating data from people's mobile phones travelling on the local network and the routes into Manchester, so things like the Princess Parkway, and are using that to control signs and signals on the strategic road network so that we know when there is, if there's sort of unusual traffic and unusually high traffic on certain routes, we can direct traffic on the SRN elsewhere, and so try and optimise, in effect, the traffic into Manchester. So I think, those sorts of pilots, etc., are just happening, and I think new technology, new data is enabling us to do more of that, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, obviously, with the freight sector, a lot of the lorries run late at night, and they often complain that the roadworks come out at the middle of the night because they assume no one's using them. And the lorries often get caught in what they consider unnecessary lane closures. I mean, do you bear in mind the fact that there are people, very important people, using the roadwork at night, not just during the day?
Yeah, so we absolutely do, and there's a lot of thinking that goes into planning and sort of delivering our roadworks. But we're constantly thinking about how do we kind of make roadworks better. We are conscious that actually we do a lot of work overnight. It's a conscious decision because it does overall sort of minimise the network, but it has a disproportionate impact on, as you say, freight customers. One of the things we've been really trying to do to sort of minimise the impact of that is really get better information about when closures are going to happen. So there's been a big step up in improvement in terms of the kind of quality and accuracy of that data, but that's going to be really a continued focus for us. So getting that data right, but then progressively trying to release that data earlier and earlier, so particularly the freight industry can plan. I think what we hear is actually people understand and don't mind kind of closures so much as long as they can plan ahead. But that really is going to be an increasing focus for us over coming years.
I think another issue is diversionary routes. they don't often bear in mind that you've got a 15.5 metre trailer sometimes behind quite a large vehicle, and some of the diversionary routes are not entirely suitable for freight.
No, and it's certainly something we're aware of in our planning for the next road period, so the 2020 to 2025 period. We're actually bidding for some more money, in effect, to focus particularly on diversionary routes. So we are conscious some of those are probably not what we would like to be at the moment. So it would be a focus, I think, going forward to try and improve those diversionary routes.
Now, the traffic officers we see driving them down our motorways at 55 miles an hour in their Land Rovers, Range Rovers, what do they do?
So they keep the network flowing, and to be honest, that's one of the most important things that we can do. So actually, the big thing for traffic officers is they help keep customers safe. So one of, for example, their key roles is when there has been an incident, thinking about how do we get the network up and running as quickly as possible. And we have some targets around this basically that we commitments that we made to government over the current period, where we're trying to get 85% of incidents, get the network flowing again within an hour. Actually, we are beating that, so we're up at sort of 87, 88%, which is great, and due to a lot of great work sort of by the traffic officers. And actually that delivers real benefit. So some of our analysis has shown that actually for every £1 invested in traffic officers, there's at least, I think, £4 or £5 return, because, as I say, some of the most important things and the things that the freight industry will most notice is actually, if there is an incident, unfortunately there are incidents, people don't want to be stuck for longer than they need to be. So the traffic officers are key in that, amongst other things.
I mean, we're here at a conference sponsored by Microlise. It's about telematics, it's about connected vehicles. How close are we to a world where you are talking to an increasing proportion of vehicles collecting data from the vehicle about traffic conditions, things like, not just relying on external cameras, things like that? Are we close to this vision of a connected world? Yeah,
so to be honest, I think so within Highways England, we're probably even more excited about connected vehicles than we are about autonomous vehicles, actually. And we think, this next road period, so 2020 to 2025, it will increasingly become a reality. So I think there's already 3 million connected vehicles on our roads, and that is only going to increase. And we think there's real benefit. So we are already running kind of a connected vehicle trial on the A2M2. It's called our Connected Corridor. And what we're finding is that when you can communicate directly with individual vehicles, even a relatively small amount of them, say less than 10%, actually you can improve traffic flows, because actually you can let people know what's going on ahead. You can basically, if there is an incident, divert them off the network, and you stop some of that pulsing and that stop-starting that causes congestion and delays on the network. So I think what's exciting for us is I don't think we're a million miles away from the kind of connected vehicle becoming much more the norm. And even with relatively small penetration, actually, we think it has real benefits to offer.
Do you see within the foreseeable future not just connected vehicles, but vehicles that you can almost take charge of and say, if you're heading towards a bit of congestion, we're going to impose a 40 mile an hour speed limit on that vehicle? Is that technology within the next few years, or is that a long way off yet?
I mean, I suspect that's quite a long way off. If there's huge uncertainty as to exactly how that technology will play out. I mean, we've obviously looked at connected autonomous vehicles, and I think what you're talking about is more the sort of a potential endpoint for sort of autonomous vehicles. And there's a huge, variation in terms of that sense of when that will become the norm. I think, interestingly, lots of manufacturers are saying level 4 autonomy by the early 2020s, which is exciting. I think, it will take quite a few years for that to become the norm, and so I think we have to be responsive to where that technology will play out.
I mean, they talk about autonomous vehicles, but I think the autonomous vehicle will be the most connected vehicle on the road.
Oh, it will be.
It won't just be sitting in isolation with its little radar. It's going to be talking to a whole bunch of things alongside the road, which you're going to have to be involved in as well, aren't you?
I think so. So the, particularly I think in environments like ours and major motorways where you have a whole number of cars on the network at any one time, Ideally you want a vehicle that can, vehicles that are connected to each other and also to the infrastructure as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that though, I mean, just to say in terms of the technology, we are, for example, we're involved in a platooning trial. We've been working with TRL and others over the past year or so, looking at how do you get sort of connected platoons of HGVs. And that's going into real world trials this summer.
Yes.
So again, I think that what we are seeing is, there are certainly the big building blocks of this technology is really starting to be a reality.
Yes.
There's obviously kind of lots of uncertainty as to how it will move forward.
Yes. Will that platooning trial be on a closed lane on a motorway, or will it be mixing with general traffic? Because I'm quite concerned about this 11-metre gap.
So I believe it's on real roads.
Are you concerned about the 11-metre gap?
So part of the purpose of the trial is to look at all of the things like safety issues and also get really clear about actually how would others interact with this. So how do you operate a network? Because obviously, there are real questions. If you have multiple sort of trucks all lined up behind each other, how do you operate the rest of the network with that? What does that mean for people trying to get off at a junction? We have in this country, we are still a quite tightly packed island. So our network, we have junctions that are relatively close together.
Yes.
So it makes it more challenging, I think, and it's really important we understand, how the platoons, etc., would potentially work with the rest of the network.
There's a lot of talk about the idea of running longer, heavier vehicles on UK roads. I mean, we've got 44 tonnes now, longer semi-trailers. Mm-hmm. What, from the technical point of view, is stopping us running the Swedish-style 60-tonne, 25.25 metres? Is there a fundamental problem with our network they don't have in Sweden?
I must admit, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure of the sort of, whether it is a regulatory issue. There are obviously, considerations that you need to think about when you run heavier and heavier trucks. To be honest, it's one of the issues for platooning, would be that if you have lots of trucks kind of closer together, actually what would the impact be on some of the bridges, etc., that we have? You need to be sure that they're safe. So I must admit, I'm not sure of the specific sort of regulations, but obviously our first imperative is safety. So we would want to make sure before there are any changes, whether it be things like platooning or be things like larger trucks, that actually they can operate safely on the network.
And what's your role in ensuring that for heavy goods vehicle drivers in particular, there are adequate rest facilities on the network? It's something that seems to be less very much to the private sector. Yeah. Is it one of your responsibilities to make sure that there are adequate truck spaces on the network?
So I would say it's not a. There are others that both provide roadside facilities and lorry parks, and others that allocate the land for them. But I think we are trying to intervene where we can. So there's a couple of specific things that we're doing. So firstly, we've undertaken quite a significant project to look at all the land we own. And think about actually, is there any land that could be converted into truck stops and lorry parks? And there's a few areas, particularly sort of within that are, we're looking harder at and seeing whether we could convert them. The second piece of work we're doing is we're conscious that actually we understand the network quite well. We understand some of the movements on it. So what we've been trying to do is analyse freight movements on our network and map that to where the lorry parts actually exist, and understand where there is a mismatch between the demand for lorry parts and their supply. And the intention of that is what we want to do is also kind of clearly define what makes a good lorry part, and produce a sort of view of actually where there is unmet demand for lorry part, and feed that into local authorities' plans. So the issue is obviously local authorities are the kind of bodies that are responsible for planning their sort of, their areas. But actually what we want to do is try and step in and play a role in terms of informing them where we think actually they should be considering where a lorry park needs to be and making provision for that.
Fantastic. Okay, final question. Talking about lorry parks, can't let you go without mentioning Brexit. What's going to happen to the M20 if we come out in October with no deal?
Again, it is not for me to.
It'll be your problem, though.
No, it's not for me to kind of forecast what will happen on Brexit. We've been doing a lot of work with government, obviously, to look at how do you mitigate potential disturbances in sort of flows across the channel. So we built up Operation Brock, which particularly. We've been doing a lot of work on the M20 and particularly between junctions 8 to 9.
Yes.
So we still have some of the infrastructure there, and I think that will sort of stay in place until sort of past October. And those Operation Brock plans are really kind of the foundation for if there is any disturbance across the channel. That would be the way that we would respond.
Okay. So Kent isn't going to grind to a halt, then whatever happens.
So I think we have some good plans in place that we would hope to enact.
That's brilliant. Elliot, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.